Councillor Mark, this committee was mentioned specifically for its improvements, and I think that's largely due to some of our external appointments. So we've got members there, and we have a new appointment as well, which is great to see. So we got Renee Penny. So welcome, Renee. And I'm going to ask you to do the opening prayer.
Kia ora koutou katoa, mihi atu kia koutou katoa. Ko mani tari whasi mai o tō tātata te awa kota atu ki te wāhata o kia na whakapau karakia ko Manamoka Te Marae, ko te araki puhi kai araki puhi tari whanau. Ko hoki aga tuku tūranga waiwai. Ka hoki ake kōrero ki te reo tuarua ka mohua koutou katoa. I'm from Manamoka. I was brought up in Coke. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Kohukohu. So I went to Kohukohu Primary School, to Kuratakewau Manganui Wai, and then went to Tamaki Makaurau subsequently. So I'm just coming home. So it's good to see you all for the karakia tīmatanga of this hui. I'm just thinking. I'm trying to think of a karakia. Do you do a karakia? Do you know a karakia? Is there a karakia that you do as a council? I'm not too sure. There is. I might add, there is a council one. I didn't have your phone number, so I would have spoken to you. But look, normally what we've done, and we can read that out. But normally it's just whatever you want to say in your karakia, and that's fine. That's how we operate here. We just roll it. Whoever's saying it. Yeah. I'm going to just do this short karakia for to open today's week. And yeah, kia ora anō. Nā mihi o te rā ki te whānau, ki te e huihui nei, kia tautirangi Māoria, kia whakatāpua tātou, me ngā mea e whakapono ana tātou, hauie tai kai. Thank you very much. And you've done your introductions. I wasn't going to cut that off, by the way. I just wanted to start with the karakia. So that's great. And it's great to have you on board. And as I said before, some of the strength of the committee is its diversity around the table, a different experience. I might add, and I did say this last time in the last meeting, the committees are here for better governance, and having the different perspective on the table and the experience and skill is what makes the committee work, and that advice then goes through to council table. So thank you again, Renee. It's great to see you here. Unfortunately, it's towards the end of the triennium, so there won't be much time to get to know you, but certainly we can follow through. We do have some apologies. We have apologies from the Deputy Mayor and Kitty Stratford, Councillor Stratford, and that is all I have. Any other apologies?
John, can I just say that I may have to speak up for some minutes on that one? Yep. That's okay.
Look, hopefully, we have lunch, don't we? And so that'll be, if we can get close to that time.
There'll be one that'll be even better, in which case I won't be an apology.
Yeah, so let's do that. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I believe His Worship the Mayor put his apologies in response to the agenda being sent as well.
Okay, thank you. And that I was wondering about that.
Yes, I've got that.
Yeah. So thank you, Councillor Smith. So if you put down the Mayor as well, and then we'll count for. So there is a bit of a mess up with you will notice those that are running online and following, and the actual printed agenda items is a page number difference. So I'll give, where required, I'll give a little bit of leniency if you like to try and find the item, but we do have to get through quite a bit time-wise in our pre-engagement, so I'll try and move quickly as well. Anybody that's online here, welcome, Moko. Kia ora. Yeah, I know you're quite busy, but just turn off the speakers and make sure you put a headset on. That actually helps a lot for hearing the sound as well. So, moving on then. So, first off, pages are different. So, if we move to page 8 as well, 8 of the previous minutes, can I have a move and a second, please?
One move there, John.
Thank you. Thank you. So we got those. Are there any corrections or errors noted in there? Correction. Errors noted. Sounds like a book game. Is it?
Everyone's got the word medic.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, moving.
Mute that one for a moment. Yeah, so any corrections? No? All in favour? No? Against? No? Carried. Got page 15. So, can I have a move and a second?
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and a seconder. Thank you, Member Bruce. So this is, I'm going to ask Tanya if she can speak to it. It's new. It's pretty significant risk, but Tanya.
Thank you, through the Chair. So this report has its genesis in the December 21 11-member risk workshop, and we were asked to have a look at the affordability risk and do similar to what we did with climate change. So in response to that request from the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee, we've set up an affordability risk reference group. Same as what we did with climate change, it's a cross-organisational group of people through the organisation that have a role to play in the affordability space and managing that space. Again, the same as what we did with the climate change risk, we completed a strategic analysis of the affordability risk. And from that analysis, we found that there were 4 themes that were sitting there, and we then created some score and risk statements for those themes that are affordability. We workshopped that with the Assurance Risk and Finance Committee, and so we have some confidence around the risks that they capture your thinking. What we've done since then is the risk reference group have sense checked what was put together, because we made some changes and completed an analysis of the impact and likelihood of those affordability risks occurring. So the 4 affordability risks are numbers ARF 020, 021, 22 and 23. This report requests that we remove the previous affordability risk, ARF 005 affordability risk, and replace it with these 4 risks. We also state in here that we'll establish regular risk reporting against those risks, and that will be very similar to what we've done with climate change. I'll come on to the top organisational risk dashboard as a cluster of risks, and we'll regularly report against it. And we've recommended that these risks are at least annually reviewed and potentially rescored to understand what is happening in that space, because there is a lot of activity in that space that we don't control. And ideally, of course, we would like to establish elected member risk appetite, and that is through the residual scoring of those 4 risks. So our goal is to enable greater clarity and ability to align work programs and approaches to treat those 4 risks. In the essence of time, would you prefer that I just open for questions?
Yeah, I think at this point. So, shall we go? Who wants to comment? Any questions?
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. And thank you, Tanya. I congratulate you, actually. I think this must have been a workshop when I wasn't here, so well done. And I don't want to go back there, because I think actually it's really important. John, it's run around the committee a bit over the last couple of years, and we haven't sort the best ways to break the problem down. So I think that's really superb. Tony, can I just check a couple of questions? One is, this has got the raw risk, right? Do we have a residual risk for this after the controls?
No, we don't. Our goal had been to have a risk workshop to establish that risk appetite. What we'll do is provide a schoolman residual risk appetite and put it to the elected members for their consideration.
I mean, I'm interested in the controls and the actions that we might take. In fact, given it's, we could almost say it's an issue rather than a risk, given the analysis of the deprivation demographics and what have you, we could almost say it's real now rather than actually a future potential. And I would make some assumption, I hear your point, we're going to workshop this, but I would make some assumption that a good number of the things that we do already would reduce this risk. But of course, okay, point taken, that's going to come up. All I would say is, and I mean, I'm stating the obvious here, is that actually with that sort of score, we must be doing something. Otherwise, we'd be, well, never, that's too strong a word, but it would be wrong of us with all the red colour of the word risk. Yep. Thank you. I've read small comments around the questions, John.
Yeah. Councillor Tiffany, I think that was your next.
Thank you, Chair Research. I had a couple of questions about this one. Oh, the first thing I noted though is, I remember when I first saw something like this, the socio-economic deprivation profile of our district on page 17. We always say we're the winterless north, and I thought that, oh, maybe this is a temperature map. Wouldn't it be great if that was what I was showing with all of that red? But unfortunately, it shows that the deprivation, 9 to 10 most deprived, that dark red, gee, that's a huge chunk of our district right there. And it is something that we need to almost have on the wall whenever we're making these decisions that we make day in, day out. I had a couple of questions though. One was, I always thought that Kirikiri had a population greater than 6,500, just as a side note. But that's interesting that there are 7 councils, including us, that don't have townships, you know, greater than 6,500. I found that pretty interesting. But my question is, we know here on the table on page 18, I had a question about understanding this table a little bit more better. If your household income, if your rates take over more than 5% of your household income, then rates are unaffordable for your household, according to Brill. Is that right?
So I think it was 2002, there was an inquiry into rates, and it was known as the Shand report. And in the Shand report, they said they believe that if households are paying more than 5% of their income for rates, that was unaffordable. And it's become a kind of a benchmark, and we'll reference that benchmark.
I just had a little question based off that, so we know that you've highlighted in the report that there are a significant number of households with rates affordability issues in our district. I think it's single superannuant. What is the meaning of like lower quartile, median, upper quartile? Because that's all of the total rates are all over 5% for those. For married superannuant as well, for single adult, 2 children on a benefit as well. And do we have the percentages of our total number of households of our district that pay rates? What's the percentage of those who are single superannuant no income? Do we have those figures to see sort of what the breakup of our rate payers are?
We do. We have. We commissioned a bill report, which is based on our 2018 census data. So, I'm sorry, I can't remember the year we commissioned it. It was 2019, or we've got it 2020 anyway. And so we've got a full report, and it looks at affordability by ward, so the 3 wards, and we looked at, it was actually Cheryl Gavin and I scoped the report with the support of our was CFO at that time. And so we came up with 8 household types, which were the most common across our district. And so the report had completed analysis for all of those household types by ward. And there's a whole lot of data that sits in behind that. So it may, if that's all right, be the best way to share that with you, would be to actually share the full report to you.
When I read this, I was you know, there's affordability issues, but I don't know the percentage of, say there's like 20-something thousand households in the Far North District. So what's the percentage of households that are actual single superannuant? Because if it's 10,000, then that's going to be, that's way more shocking than if it was, say, only, there are actually only 10 households that meet that profile type or something that I thought it would help to feed my understanding of this table.
I think it would be more helpful to give you the full picture than to answer specific questions, and then happy to talk.
If you could circulate the full report, would be nice. Now, I realise that there is, and I think, did you have your hand up? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, just I realise that this is meant to be workshopped as well, and we'll do that. That'll be in the new triennium, I guess. So I think a lot of those questions could be answered there. So if we could make a note for the full report. And Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Tanya, thank you for this excellent but highly sobering report. It's always really helpful from a governance point of view to see really visual representation of the challenges that we're facing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can use this information, to Bruce's point about when we don't understand it, we break it down further, how we can use this in the same vein, as you say, as climate change, to get a more integrated approach to affordability across our organisation. So I'm really stoked that we've managed to get to this point by the end of the triennium, so thank you. I just wanted to pick up on Bruce's point around the residual risk scoring, and I mentioned this to you prior to the meeting, but just to the benefit of the committee. I went through an exercise myself of doing what I would have thought my residual risk score was, and I think that that's quite momentous for me because it finally means that I understand how to set that residual risk score, so I was a little bit gutted that we weren't able to go through that exercise today. But Mr. Chair, I just wondered if it would be fitting to simply make a note as part of the resolution today that that score still needs to be set, because I know that through the triennium, through the election, the only thing that goes with us into our action sheet is our resolutions. So I think it's really important that that gets solidified and picked up at the beginning of the triennium. When I reflect on our drinking water resilience, for example, we still haven't set a residual risk score there either. So what I don't want to happen is for this to drag out and for our staff to not understand what our risk appetite is. So I think that it would be great to just have that noted, please. And then just finally picking up, especially on the points that Councillor Tepania has made, but also Bruce in terms of the bigger picture. And I just want to highlight to my fellow elected members the opportunity that comes with this report. We've got the Associate Minister for Local Government coming to join us for one whole hour on the 8th of September. And I think this is a great example of the information that we need to be sharing with him to understand, for example, Councillor Tepania, that table that you've highlighted, the challenges that we actually face here and how different we are to the rest of the country. We know that it's not often that we get to have our central government representatives in the room, so I'd really like to highlight to the committee the importance of making sure that this is front and centre of that conversation. Otherwise, I'm really happy with the report. I'm excited to see where this takes us, and hopefully we can start to pull some levers. Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Smith. And let's do that. Let's make a note in there, because it's a change, so that there is a recommendation to do the workshop, and note that we want to do. Just my comments is yeah, unfortunately it's not a heat map, but it's worse than that actually. If you look at, which I have done since when did it start? I think in the 80s, when they started looking at deprivation, that I can see records online anyway, and every single mesh block except for 1 or 2 have got progressively worse. So going back to your comment there, Member Bruce, that this isn't this an event rather than a risk? I think I was very valid. And do we have controls in place? Well, we probably are aware of it, but is our decision making being formalised or not? And I'd say it isn't. And by identifying these and breaking it out, like while we'll go to a meeting and say, hey, portability is an issue, now that I can see coming out is that by splitting it out this way, we can actually measure it and see our progress. And I agree also with Tanya that some of these things that affect the deprivation are outside of our wheelhouse. Nevertheless, that is an issue that we have to take into account, and I'd say other groups have to take into account as well. And the solution probably lies in a collective approach. And everything we actually do, we should be aware of that. So I think it's great, and so thank you, Tanya. I don't know if I've got any other questions there. No. Let's.
Yeah, please.
Oh, sorry. Member Edmonds, I missed you there, sorry.
One of your comments, Tanya, was we'll come back for a risk risk appetite, and you mentioned the score. Now the score, I know, a single number doesn't really cut it for me because it doesn't really mean anything. It's easy to hide. It's easy to hide the underlying people, the underlying risks, the underlying issues. And what I'd like to see, and I know I'm not going to be here for that, but I'd like to have it considered because it is I guess a structural change to the way you report, and that is our risk appetite being stated in real world terms rather than just a number, and that may be like almost a KPI term, really. And so if we've got more than 10% of the country, of the district paying more than 10% of the rates, then I would say that's a real world measure. So I'd like that to be considered as our risk appetite, or risk appetites in those terms, rather than just a single number that takes a whole bunch of stuff that can be aggregated and given something that doesn't mean anything to anybody. Because otherwise it's just a feeling, right? No, we negotiate, is it 45, is it 24, is it 33, and it doesn't mean anything to us.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
I just in a general sense, I'm just thinking about the makeup of the risk reference group, and just thinking about the integrated and the whole concept of risk. And I know and how to mitigate those risks in regards to integrated planning. And I think there's a real narrative here, which is semi-good for advocacy for resource, but however, we've got to really bring in the narrative about the strengths of our communities, the resilience in our communities, the strong Te Ao Māori, the strong Te Reo, and all these communities in what they've got to offer to mitigate this. So that's why it's important that we have a Te Ao Māori perspective and coming up through in regards to that risk reference group, and then also going out to engaging interests.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. And I agree with you. The problem is, which I was saying, is very broad, and it's outside of this wheelhouse of some of the things that council does. And we'd be remiss if we didn't look to our local communities to see where the strength lies to address some of these problems. And we are, in some respects, doing things like Member Bruce. We have got social procurement, or should say sustainable procurement, however you want to call it, which does help. But that is a step in the right direction. But definitely, I think our strength lies in the community, as Member Penny has put it down. So thank you. So I'll put this to the vote now. All in favour? Against? Carried. Moving to page 33 on my agenda items, I think we've still got synchronisation with the numbers there. And so do I have a move on the second item 6.2, please?
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
6.1.
6.1. Oh, I jumped right ahead. 6.1.
I'll move that one then.
I'll see you, good.
Yeah. Councillor Smith and Councillor Tippania. So, revenue recovery, we'll take it as read. Any questions? No.
Oh, sorry.
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 Councillor Smith looked. I think she looked around and she got to beat you to that one.
We're not having this report spoken to at all. Taking it as read.
The author is online and has various ailments. So we're just asking if there's any questions, and if Janice can't solve them, then we'll call her on. So far away.
Thank you. Picking up on the point that was raised on the earlier item, again, I struggle to understand the big picture of this one. Firstly, though, can I just point out that I've got a crook neck from the fact that all of the pages are sideways, so I can't actually read it properly. Because you can't turn your iPad because it turns the image. So I think that that's just a point we're taking into the next triennium. If we're going to put sideways pages in a digital copy, can we make sure that elected members have the ability to turn those pages through various software or something?
You can block it on your iPad.
Only on a paid subscription service, Mr. Chair, which we don't receive as part of our elected membership.
Right.
I've lost my train of
Is that your question?
No.
But I agree.
Can we put it in the service? Absolutely. Right.
I've lost my train of thought now, apologies.
Sorry, I'll go while she thinks.
Cut
That's
it
all right.
down, and I won't upset you either.
Hey, a couple of questions. So, for the total, on page 28, for the total number of general title rates accounts marked as debt recovery action to commence, it says there that 32% of properties only have last year's rates in arrears. So that would be 32% of the, on page 29, debt recovery action to commence. There are 649 accounts. So is that 32% of the number of accounts there, which means 207 accounts didn't pay last year's rates. Is that how I read it?
Correct.
Okay, but then if I go further, 55% of the accounts have arrears of 3 or more years. So I can do the same thing, 55% times 8. I was just wondering if that's how I counted. I was just trying to put it into like real figure numbers of like how many households didn't actually, in general title, didn't actually pay their rates last year. And after the last report, it would be interesting to see if those accounts align with the affordability blocks that we've just highlighted. And if so, you know, then we can align these two and look at solutions with that risk that we have there. I just
So through the chair, do you want that as an action item? It's entirely possible. Just
yeah. Well, I think it just it helps because I'm getting all of this data and picking and choosing how to read it, and I think it would be extremely helpful if we.
If it helps, I think everybody's happy. Yeah.
And my other question was, how are we going about, so debt recovery action to commence for non-freehold land, we've got 1,189 accounts. That's huge. 1,189 accounts that haven't paid rates. It's always been a big number. We know that we wiped a lot of debt with the passing of the rating of Whenua Māori amendment. Is our organisation resourced, Te Hono and our rating department resourced appropriately so to actually be able to work through these? And if not, what can we do about it?
I'll give the part of the answer through the chair. Short answer is no. I'm familiar with this. In the Manawa 2, they actually set up a service centre called Debt Management Central to work across a number of councils to try and pull that resource to try to recover these sort of debts. At an individual council level, again, almost Pareto's principle, 80% of the ratepayers is the key goal. When we look, our rating team over a year get about 9,000 requests for service, which they deal with. Trying to deal with another 1,100 on top of that plus 600 etc. You run out of resource very quickly, and then we start getting other. Because again, remember we've touched on the rating system is very complex here. We've got individual rates for individual depending on where you are. So that's the challenge. If you want that, I would be coming back to you with a report on what extra resource or how I can deliver that.
I would be extremely interested in seeing that, because I when I look at the pure numbers that we've got here, it's like, well, that's Is that always going to stay like that?
No, it can be dropped.
Yeah.
They're like the team.
And not just from a pure numbers sense, but we know that these are like real families that are 1,189 Māori freehold accounts is probably 40,000 people, you know, like when we know that how many people are descendants of a single land block, that's a huge number of people and the relationships and everything that goes with that. And it's an ugly thing when you have to, when you haven't paid and then council comes along to, what do we call it? Do debt recovery action, and how do we go through that process? So I would be very interested in seeing how we make that easier for us and resource it appropriately with everything that comes with it. So.
Happy to do. That'll be the next training again, I suspect, and also potentially how we go in the future and centralised rating might be smart.
Sorry.
So that's John. No, I'll go to Councillor Smith because she was next, and then remember.
But she's stuck sideways.
and then Member Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question and then a comment following my opening comment. So my question is in regards to page 31, and I know that there's still a significant chunk outstanding that's sitting at the beyond 90 days for building and resource consent, and we did have a conversation around this, I think around 6 months ago. But again, just trying to understand those trends, I'd be interested to know how long is 90 plus days? Is that a significant period of time, or is that like the 120 day mark? And are we confident that we've got mechanisms in place to be collecting that, to recover that debt? But also, have we learned from that to ensure that going forward, we don't see more of that figure sit in the 90 day plus? Was that a cohesive question? I'm not sure if it was.
I understand staff actually go to quite a little length to look at the different options too. How would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, through the chair, we work with anyone who wants to put in payment plans for how they want to pay arrears, be it sundry debtors or rates. There is significant work at the moment with the resource content team, but obviously that's being delayed because of the pressure on actually issuing resource consents and the time frame we've got in that space. So the work that they were doing on focusing on here is not necessarily progressing at the pace that we'd hoped, because obviously they can't do both things at the same time. So we do have some pressure in that team with competing demands. But we are working through as much as we can with the teams to make sure that these numbers come down.
So then a supplementary question. What is the impact of having debtors at a significant period of time on the ratepayer sitting there if we're not currently investing? Again, to the point that Councillor Tipania raised as well, if we don't have the resource to be investing in recovering that debt, what is the impact long term on the ratepayer?
Ultimately, I mean, through the chair, ultimately, the impact on the ratepayer would be if it becomes non-recoverable, as in it goes too far to become a recoverable debt. We're not in that space with these. The issue we've got between the revenue recovery team and the debt collection is that they are not the subject matter expert in terms of what the invoice is for. They're there to collect, and when we get queries about what the invoice is for or the content of that invoice, then we have to pass it over. And maybe Dr. Dean has got some words around that interplay between the two things.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The only bit that I'd add is the fees and charges that have been approved by Council for this financial year include provisions for early increased payments in the first instalment stage. And I think that will make a difference going forward. So we actually recovering the cost early and with less of a cost recovery at the back end. So I think that will make a significant difference. With regards to the recovery, I mean, Janice has summarised it very well. This is an ongoing effort, working for the two teams working on this, and the amount of time that the resource consent team has been able to spend on this of late has been, you know, an issue, because their primary focus is to attend to the 20-day statutory compliance aspects. So that is all consuming at the moment. Not to say that this isn't important and is receiving, attention as well, but perhaps not as much attention as it would in normal circumstances.
Well, can I just follow up on that? Because I was going to ask a question to get to the actual council report, the finance report, about the resourcing. Can I just ask a couple of follow-up questions though? With the resourcing, the clear resourcing constraints you're facing, and I hear the point about increased resource consent applications that are processing. Are we at risk? And we've had discount because of delays in getting resource consent out. No trouble with that. Technically, are we at risk of not even billing in the first place?
No, it's 50% max.
Yeah.
Sorry, I understand that, but I mean, if we're so focused on dealing with the work, getting with the actual consent dealt with, are we also we're not at risk of also forgetting we also got to bill them as well?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the financial situation for last year, if I could just briefly recap, we had a $1.4 million in excess of revenue result, based on large volume of consents, etc. So the revenue side is looking particularly good. On the other side, obviously, there's that risk of an increased discounting up to 50% of the fee. We saw probably 2-3 years ago, we saw a figure of around $250,000 in discounting. The last time I looked, it was around 45,000, increasing to, I think on a projection, 77,000. We're keeping a close eye on those discounting figures as we bring the situation back to a 20-day statutory compliance. That of course goes away, it disappears. But so we're keeping a close eye on that. So it's revenue on the one hand and offset by lost revenue in effect to the maximum of 50%. And we are working very hard to make sure that that figure doesn't go up as it did 2 or 3 years ago.
I think I expressed myself too well. I guess my question is, there's no risk of us not billing in the first place, is there? Because of the pressure that we're under. No. I mean, I appreciate then we've got to manage A, collection, B, discounting and what have you, but given the resourcing pressure, we're not missing out on the opportunity to bill in the first place.
No, we're not.
Yeah, and I'll bring us back to this item.
Well, actually, sorry, I've been a bit naughty, but it does come back. It does. Janice's good point is that you're going to come down.
Last question, Councillor.
Sorry, I just wanted to carry on with my line of questioning with Janice, if that was all right. Janice, you used the term non-recoverable, and at that point there becomes an impact on the ratepayer. Is it fair to say that the line items saying debt recovery action to commence, are those non-recoverable at that point?
In terms of rights?
Yes.
No, it just means that we haven't figured out the best way to approach that particular account.
I'm just trying to get an understanding of how this is all working and where the impact hits versus where we're investing our resource. And I'm just feeling a little bit concerned about what that's looking like, simply because we don't have the resource to be currently, and I hear that, to be investing at the front end. I'm trying to understand what the impact is that this report is trying to tell me.
Sorry, to clarify my answer, if I can, through the chair. The initial, when someone is overdue by 30 days, is often the best time to get them. That's the most likely. There's a service, a fee. Some of these here, in a polite way, the people they just simply do not want to pay for those, and the percentage of those drops down. But the energy or the amount of resource it takes to convince someone of the need, which is generally through a court action or some liability that they are creating, is what chews up a lot of staff resource for a very finite amount of time. A write-off is normally where the cost of recovering that money are to be exceeded than the money we would get, or it is over 3 years. And if you look at some of the rating sales, forced rating sales of places where people have not paid, and again, it still requires a court action to get that, and even then, the council may write off significant sums of money. It's not a case of the ratepayer just forgot that those are followed up. There's usually a situation, the debt is getting in that area of the 90-day plus, and those are the ones where I'd like to work with Janice and some of the other service providers to see whether we can tip D&C or one of those, Definition Central, and to try and pick up some of those, because there's a standardised fee per one. At the moment, we could say 8 hours start time, and to try and recover it from one ratepayer rather than just one of the ones you can literally, Janice could harm all. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
I think through the chair, one thing I would like to say in terms of the rate accounts, if you look at the numbers, we've got 649 accounts on general title and 1,189 on Maori freehold land. So about 2,800 in total out of 38,000 accounts. So there's not that many that we aren't active in terms of.
That's really helpful, Janice, and that comes back to my initial point about the bigger picture. Paint me the picture. What is it that I'm seeing here? Yeah. Because contextually, the numbers only make sense if we put them in the context and we illustrate that. So I think that there's some really key statements that could be made in this report going forward to help illustrate. Because I think this data, the data that we've just received in the previous report, when we start talking about the fact that Council had an appetite to continue with reviewing its rating system, it's understanding what that picture looks like. And I think that we've got some really key data to start illustrating that. So thank you, that's helpful.
And Councillor Tiffany raised that point before. Member Penny, well, that will move on.
I'm just, I think for someone in my position where I'm trying to advocate for Māori, considering we're in a housing crisis, I'm interested in some more data around forced rating sales, or I know there's limitations on Māori freehold land, but is there anything under general title where Māori communities are being subject to these sorts of debts? Because perhaps when I'm thinking of someone like Ricky Houghton, how he would save people from mortgage and things like that. So I would like more information, really.
I think, can I speak to this one?
Yes.
Under the new, and Janice can correct me, but under the new rating of Whenua Māori amendment, general title land that once was Māori freehold land is now treated as Māori freehold land, is that right? In this space, unless there's already a mortgage on it?
Through the chair, it's what we class as 1967 Act accounts that were moved by force to general title. Yep. So the Whenua Māori changes to the Rating Act prohibit us from taking any action on that land in terms of forced sale or abandoned land, because we have to treat it as if it is Maori freehold land, which we were doing anyway, because we knew that there was contentious issues in that space. So we were already working with those account holders to see if we would move it back to Maori freehold land. So we weren't taking action in that space anyway. So yeah, in terms of those types of accounts, we're not making those kind of attempts to recover, if that makes sense.
Yes, I'm just thinking also, like, if we're looking at the deprivation data, and then we're thinking about the housing crisis, and thinking about whether it's Māori or non-Māori, like taking those sorts of steps. I know we have to seek rates, but forced rating sales. What are some
through
numbers?
The chair, in terms of forced rating sale, we have only proceeded on 2 accounts to forced rating sale. One of those we now have under an agreement to pay, so that is being held in abeyance. The other one was not contested and wasn't an occupied property. So the rest of them we have taken court proceedings against, and we will have an item put on the title of the property to say that the money is owed to council. So if those properties are sold, our debt comes off any of those sales. But none of those have progressed to rating sale, and that's in the last 17 years the only 2 accounts that we have taken to forced sale.
So, yeah, I'm going to I'm being a bit lenient. Just a reminder, this is about risk, so we're not really looking at trying to solve the problems here. I do note the concern, and that's why, and it's a major, as we had in the previous item about affordability. So, but can I just say that when we look at, I think you remember, Penny, when you mentioned about the communities themselves, ideally council should be focusing outside of this risk committee at looking at some of the major issues we're facing, working with other government departments and seeing and being involved in that to address this. There's a whole lot of connecting parts in here. And yes, we do have a housing crisis, and yes, I think we should be doing something about it in terms of regard. That I think is a form where we can work to look at the best opportunity, and then the accounts department works in and gets an understanding of what's happening there to deal with some of these problems. So thank you, but this is looking at the risk to our organisation and the non-payment, and it's not high when Dennis puts it in perspective as it is there. So thank you for the discussion, and I started being a bit lenient and go around because there are problems. So putting to the receipt of the report, and that's all this is about, and to the vote, all in favour? Aye. Against? Nobody, carried. Item 6.2, which I've been long waiting for. Pretty cheeky, because I jumped ahead. Can I move a second for that? Yeah, thank you, Member Bruce. And I'll second it since someone else put their hand up. So do we have questions, which I'm sure we do? Question of clarification. Again, we are receiving the report. From a risk perspective, are there trends in there as well? I'm just saying what I would like to see questions being taken at that we should be aware of. So I'm going to actually, have we got a speaker for this? Yeah. Okay. Jill, if you want to say anything just that's of note in terms of what I just said, are there risks in here that are different, say, or outstanding out from comparison to what is the norm in other councils or not?
Through the chair, I think the one that's highlighted is career progression, and we've looked to how we can investigate that risk through the state interviews. With regards to our turnover, then I think that's also in there. We had it in the last report. We are totally in line with other councils across New Zealand.
Thank you. I'm taking the report has been read, but are there any questions of clarification and any to direct it? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report, Jill. I just wanted to ask a question in regards to the other trends that we're seeing, and that's around salary. My question is how we fit in terms of pay parity across the sector, not just the local government sector, but the public service sector. I know that that's a really significant risk to losing our people at the moment, as the local governments are grappling with affordability, and that in turn means that we can't afford to pay our people, so we're losing them. Do we know how we sit in terms of pay parity across the sector?
So across local government, then, because we all use the same benchmarking system, we're fine. We are struggling against the central government, so the central government are obviously taking some of our people for salaries, and the private sector consultants.
Member Bruce.
Thank you, Jill, for your report too. It's illuminating. I was interested when I got to the factors that influence people's decisions. Actually, by the way, I could say 15%, which I think your turnover is actually one of the best I've seen. To be honest, by that.
Oh my goodness!
On the assumption low is good. It is actually this
pretty good
environment. 15% is a remarkable result. Actually.
Yeah.
Compared with the other councils I'm involved with. So when I look at the factors, I was interested to think, so what can we control? And I mean, I think the analysis you're doing around the culture is, and I was interested in those stay interviews, which seemed like a very good initiative. I think perhaps I just wanted to ask my question about those stay interviews, which you describe here. What now happens? You've got the information, you've interviewed everybody, what happens now?
Yeah, so we haven't interviewed everybody as yet, but we started with resource consents, and Jean, you might want to chip in here. So in some areas we have looked at market supplement allowances for a period of time, and we have actioned that within the roles in resource consents. And that's the key area we focused on, to be honest. The next is building and infrastructure. Yeah,
But the point.
but also looking at their career progression and development plans for the people.
Okay, thank you.
The Dean, given.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We've reached the point in resource consents where we just were competing with a market that was, we couldn't compete. And that's why with Jill's team's assistance, we brought in the market allowance, which will accommodate some of that. There are a multitude of reasons why people leave this organisation or any organisation, and the money side of it, what we pay, is one part of that. There are other reasons. I think younger staff have different drivers, different motivations. We're seeing that generationally, that people do move on, and sometimes they are looking for that next opportunity, and it's not always money driven, although that was primarily the factor within resource consents. If we broaden that to other areas, it's circumstantial a lot of the time. Also, people move on for their own reasons.
Thank you.
So it's a real mix.
I have one question. And Jill, are we seeing any signs, because we have the Three Waters amalgamation, are we seeing any signs, because I hear rumours that elsewhere staff and expertise in that area are moving? Are we seeing signs of that? Is Andy, I see there. So can I ask that question of staff actually moving, and if so, what is that going to, what risk are we facing given the infrastructure that we have and the workload that Andy has?
So I'm going to answer the first part of that, and you can answer the second. The first part of the answer relates to the rationale for moving to the Three Waters Alliance that we are structuring. So we actually identify those staff, we get that transition, we get them in place, they have security, they know the roles, they know how it's all fitting together. The second part is a relevant one, which is where Andy can talk. These new entities are being established. It is in DIA, they are shoulder tapping, they are willing to take on people, so we have a risk that people like Andy, for example, that have been working in that at a high level can be shoulder tapped, that the likes of Glenn or similar can go across. That there are people in the water operation area, it doesn't so much affect them, but there is a pressure to relocate, to bring, there's so much money going into the Three Waters area, not just the tranche one funding, which is yet to be determined, but the other areas. Andy, do you want to touch on what you're picking up?
Okay, just hold fire just a second. And Councillor Smith, you had your hand up. Is there a similar question that?
No, I wanted to be cheeky and ask a follow-up question to mine if you would allow it, but after this, thank you.
Okay,
I have a question too.
All right, Andy.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd echo Blair's comment. Certainly the DIA have finally got themselves organised in terms of a structure and form, and are starting to understand the volume of work that is needed to set up Entity A and the new structure for delivery of Three Waters across Northland and Auckland. Certainly they are looking to set up local transition teams fairly shortly, and have echoed the fact that they, or continue to have conversations around the fact that they are going to need more staff than are currently employed in Three Waters. So the work they're doing with Jill and the communication work that's happening has been really good. So staff are aware of what is happening across the timelines. The one key part that's to our advantage is the fact that they have articulated that you are better off continuing to work in a council in terms of eventual transition, if that's where you want to go, than moving to the private sector, when effectively you may be excluded from some of the transition. You will be excluded from the transition arrangements. So they are supporting councils moving forward.
That's encouraging to know. So we've got two questions. Is that? I don't want to jump ahead of the queue.
Can I ask one in relation to that? Sorry, I have another question, but I'd just like to ask Andy a follow-up question.
And Councillor Tiffany, is your question related to Andy's comment?
No, this is on the report overall.
All right, so follow-up question from you, Councillor Smith.
Andy, does that put us at greater risk, given that we know, and apologies, I'm not sure how the Three Waters Alliance fits into this, but given that we know that at the moment our Three Waters staff don't just focus on Three Waters, so that what risk does that pose to the rest of the organisation if we start to lose our waters staff, being that they don't just deliver waters?
Through the chair, then we do have a number of staff that are 100% focused on Three Waters, and they're clearly going to work across the Alliance reset, which is the right thing to do, and also move into the new water entity when the time comes. We have been looking around staff and the number of people that are partially working on Three Waters, and having conversations with them and working out where the best fit for those will be going forward. But I come back to my previous comment, it is clear and has been part of the ongoing conversation is there's more work than staff.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then your last question.
Thank you, Chair Research. I've got a couple of questions, Joe. It's good to see you. You've got really nice hair too. A couple of things. One, I noticed that on page 35, the turnover by the department, so it gives a breakdown of percentages. So, for example, the Chief Executive Office had a turnover of 30% of the staff within the department. Strategic planning and policy, 23%. Are there conversations that you have with like the department heads, like with our general managers, in regards to the numbers that come through here? So we get these statistics, and I know you look at it overall and you produce this report, but does our organisation look at it, so for example, the CEO office, is there a conversation had with Blair that actually we had 30% turnover in your department, or with Darren, we had 23% in yours, so that's quite a significant number of people who have been turned over. Is there anything like that happens?
Yep, so there's two good ones. So that the key thing to remember that in the CEO office is my team and also comms, and it's quite a small team, and actually quite a few of my team decided to uproot for career progression or move overseas. So but yeah, so Darren and I also had the conversation. Darren's also got a small team, so the percentage reflects is higher. So we do have conversations, and again, it relates to what are we doing about trying to keep people. We have also got our new engagement survey tool that is going to really help us moving forward. It actually identifies those teams that are at risk of high attrition. So we can use that to now start saying, well, what do we need to do?
And my other question was, and this is really great after, I remember the last ARF when this came across, we were talking about, you brought up, remember, Edmund, about, stay interviews are better than exit interviews. And so it's great to see that those have started. And so in here it says they were asked if they were comfortable for their feedback to be shared. I gave a little plug-in for staff and sort of gave some examples at our last ARF meeting about some sort of out-of-the-box ideas that we do in our kura, for example, to try and keep people's well-being up, or to, I don't know, are there any out-the-box sort of ideas? Like I put it out there as an example, like everyone who does a stay interview goes into the draw to win an iPad, or, to try and encourage people to actually. Are we doing anything like that? I just I thought I'd check if what's the buy-in for me to do a stay interview. 30 minutes, I get to have a break from my job for 30 minutes and have a chat with your team, or
we might do it in your lunch hour. No, but I think it's actually just the engagement with our people. We're just really happy that we're actually taking a interest in their career development and what they want to do in council, which is not that hasn't been done before, but we're doing it in quite a structured way. The other thing we have just launched, though, is we've got our new key success factors, which is linked to performance. So it's a little bit different, but as a part of that, we will be rewarding exceptional performance. which is new for, quite new, I think, even for local government and council. It's quite forward thinking. And obviously it will be calibrated so that not everyone's obviously high performing, but that's a really good news story for NDC.
Well, thank you for that, and it's really great to see this progress from our last meeting. And
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair Busich. I think this might be partially a question for you, but I'll ask it to Jill. Jill, just in the retention and recruitment, a trend that we've been seeing in that commentary is that we're finding it harder and harder to recruit. Would it be fitting for this report to have slightly more data in that space going forward, so that we're getting a clearer picture of not only the turnover, but whether or not we're actually managing to fill that turnover, or whether we're running in a negative? I think it would just be helpful to understand what that bigger picture looks like.
Yep, we can. We report on recruitment and retention every month in my team. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, I'm going to put now to the
The phrase under the stand views flight risk. What is a flight risk?
Somebody that might leave the organisation that we don't want to, so it could be a critical role or it could be top talent.
Do we use the term flight risk with the staff? Or is it solely for this meeting and in this report?
I think we do actually through our succession planning. Sometimes I'm too ingrained that I go, yes, I think we do, but you might want to ask some of my colleagues go, yes, we do through succession planning. We do use that term, don't we?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, because I mean, if I put myself into that category, let's say I was in an organisation and I was termed a flight risk, that would be a turn off for me. I mean, I think there can be used a different term. A flight risk, as the flight risk is normally associated with criminals. Who are a flight risk to overseas country or someone that's the only place you hear it, except for here, a flight risk.
Okay, it's quite news to me. I'm just thinking about all the organisations I worked in. We've actually used that phrase to realise they were criminals.
I can have a go.
Yep.
Through the chair, sorry. Flight risk in this context is positive, because what we are expressing, and it's not just simply flight risk, it's a flight risk because of the talent that they possess and the market drivers that are seeing other organisations, whether private or public, looking to want those.
Oh, look, I have no problems with the concept. I was just questioning the actual term.
And other organisations do use different terms, and in fact they insure their against such risks as well, probably. Anyway, I don't think you need to respond to anything because I want to move on, and I think that's all the questions. So put it to the vote. All in favour? Aye. So item 6.3, do I get a move in a second?
Happy to move, Mr.
And I'll second. And so this is the risks. We'll put the amendment, council. So this is the beat in this report, so I'm expecting some clarifications, but any other comments? Tanya, you want to highlight some key things in that report for us, and then I'll open it to questions or clarifications.
Thank you. Through the chair. This is my regular risk management report to the Insurance Risk Finance Committee. You'll find in here that we had 9 scheduled top organisational risk progress reports. Only 8 risk progress reports were made, and that is because the 9th is around asset management, and the infrastructure management team have asked that they revisit and restate this risk with the reset of Darwin. And you'll see that there is an item on this agenda 7.4 which talks to asset management reset. I've noted in here that we continue to operate in a dynamic environment, possibly a bit of an understatement. And I've provided a bit of a high-level national and international scan of that environment for your information. We've included an emergent risk, and that emergent risk is around the increasing probability that a current risk will materialise around resource consents. So on the agenda that I received, that's page 47.
Yep.
There'll be somewhere around there. We talk about where historically we've issued some resource consents with specific consent conditions, and where we may not have provided the required asset to meet those conditions. I also drew your attention here to the fact that we've been working through some really old resource consents where we had held bonds, and we have been returning those bonds after checking that the conditions around which the bonds were held have been met, and there are a number of resource consent conditions that haven't been met where we believe there is a need for remediation so that those conditions are met, and they're all being managed through as well.
Okay, good.
A highlight for me, sorry, I have to share my highlight, is that I've been able to retire all the group risk registers and have moved all the group risk registers to a SharePoint list now, which I'm in a queue to get some BI set up for that list, so we'll be able to give you much fuller organisational risk reporting. So that's my highlight that I wish to share.
Pleased to hear that.
And of course, we've got 2 additional risk reports on this agenda. We've spoken to one, that's the affordability risk, and I have a report on here around the impact of Three Waters reform on organisational risk management and potential emergent risk from that. Quite happy to take questions. Sorry, one other thing I needed to draw your attention to. The last ASK meeting I gave you a verbal update on an emergent risk, which is around what we're calling risk IAM 066, which is the implications to NTA budgets of cost increases. I have put that on the emergent table as I committed to do, and you had a report to Council on the 11th of August around that issue.
Thank you. Does that relate to the recent storm events or just the natural, well, not the unnatural that we got at the moment?
It relates to a budget that may not go as far as originally believed it would.
All right, I'm open to questions. I'm expecting more questions.
Mr. Chair, can you clarify, are you going to take report by report, or are you just wanting questions about the whole lot?
I'm looking for a speedy way forward, but I'm happy to go report by report. Does that mean you, Councillor Smith, have got a question and everyone on?
No, not necessarily. It was just making sure that we're all on the same page.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll do that. Given the numbering, we may do that. Member Bruce.
John, could I just ask clarification, and hopefully I was listening, Tanya. The emergent risk, I must guess without wanting to dive into detail, I just want to work out quite what this consent condition was and what does that mean?
I'd like to refer to our subject matter.
Short background, does this mean they've put stuff on the ground we haven't connected them?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This happened some time ago, approximately 10 years ago. So in essence, the resource consent has lapsed and the conditions are now being resurrected by the developer or the agent on behalf of the developer. So we don't believe that it's a real risk to council. Obviously, there may be a challenge on that, and we would then have to follow a legal process to address that. I think why this is relevant, and thanks, Tanya, for including it. I think under the direction of the Chief Executive, we are looking to a more integrated approach to how consents are issued and how infrastructure is managed in support of growth, etc. And where there's a mismatch, as in this instance, albeit that this is historical, we want to be sure that in the future, where we issue consents and attach conditions to those engineering infrastructure requirements, that we can be confident that those conditions can be met from the council side. So where connections are put in, for example, in this instance, I think it's in the order, the potential claim is in the order of about $250,000. We don't want to be in a situation where that repeats itself and where we are potentially liable as council then to say, well, yep, you know, it's an error on our part. So more integrated planning, I think, is part of the solution, and it will be a mitigating measure going into the future in terms of making sure that we cross the T's, dot the I's, and that we're not on the receiving end of claims like this going forward.
Just, can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
There's there's a couple of items in here. First is what Dr. Dean Myberg is highlighting. There is a band of work going on, or a stream of work going on between Dean's team, Darren's team, Janice's team, and Andy's team, so that as these consents are being considered, we understand the impact on those assets as we're taking the consumption out, in other words, reserve capacity. We're equally starting to model out what we need to bring back in to influence some of the renewals, which recognises that Project Darwin is very much based around depreciation renewals type thing, rather than a capacity and condition rating driven system. The bigger issue that I'm wanting to signal here is in today's market or post-COVID, people are recognising that construction cost indices are hitting around 20%. So there is a significant pressure on council to try and progress through these steps, because quibbling over a $10,000 issue around a pump station that may hold up a consent that has got $2 million worth of work is actually going to have a net cost to the community. In other words, yes, we may save ourselves $10,000, but the community's just paid 20% on $2 million worth of work. That's the real construction indices going out there. So what we're having to do is work with those developers around how we try and manage some of the, to allow them to get their construction and get these items underway, because every year they leave it. We know ourselves, in our construction program, we did sort of 61 million out of 140 or 170, which is right now. 140. We did 61 out of 140 in terms of our capital program. So that means next year, when we go to do more of that, we're actually going to deliver, because that cost us that much more, we'll deliver that much less or increase the budgets. So the developers are doing the same thing. So there's a lot of work going on between those teams, how we can make those developers more effective to get that infrastructure in the ground, because the likes of Ben Goldson from Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and others are putting significant pressure on us to ensure this housing is actually delivered in a reasonable time frame, because that's the affordability question you related to right at the start. Does that sort of give you a thread of how these things are all tying together?
It does, and I'm pleased you're seeing it that way, actually. That's good. And we've got that risk identified as well. So, any other questions? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tanya. On page 56, where are the gaps? What more could we be doing? It's identified under the health, safety and wellbeing vulnerabilities risk report. The FNDC has roughly 300 asbestos management plans that are due for review by 2023. Contextually, I have no idea if 300 is a big job or a little job. So my question is, are we resourced to be able to meet that need? Because again, that is just identifying what more we could be doing. So just looking for some assurance that we are geared up for success on that one piece.
I am going to refer to Andy. I know it's in their work program, but Andy can talk to whether they have sufficient resource.
Andy.
Through the chair, there 300 asbestos management plans is a significant number to update. It will be done by the asset managers. Of course, while they're doing that, they're not doing other activity. And as an infrastructure provider, I'm aware that there's a lot of pressure in various areas that need to be achieved. This just is part of the compliance issue that we do need to address. Thank you.
I'm not sure that really answers my question.
Said it was a significant bit of work.
So Andy, sorry, did I hear that yes, we will be able to do it, but there will be other things that we won't do instead, so we may generate risk in other areas? Is that what I heard?
So through the chair, of course, if I've got 2 members of staff updating the asbestos management plans, they're not doing other activities, but the asbestos management plans are a key part of compliance, so would need to take a priority.
So, other questions?
John, sorry, through you, if it's okay. I'm always interested in the way in which the risks that we've identified are moving. And I'm conscious that we probably have a key item in PX which addresses a number of the ones which I think you've identified in this public report, Tanya, that are increasing in trend. And I think we need to recognise that's the key thing, and probably addresses a number of these ones which are less than stable because they're increasing. And so I think that's a really critical point to note as we proceed.
Yeah. Okay. Just on these bonds, I'll say quite quickly, yeah, the fact that they've been there for some time, obviously, the audit's picked up, but there may be time limits that expire, which means that the work that hasn't been done may result in an extra cost on us. I'm not so, I know you've got your hand over that, but I'm just thinking about their internal processes and structures. So would you, I think, alluded to Dr. Nadine, but are we taking learnings from this and capturing that so that we're not dropping the ball in this regard?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the bonds are held by council and require the developers to reinstate or to do work, etc., to council satisfaction before the release of the bond. So the fact that we have bonds held by council and that we haven't yet released them are a function of monitoring officers being able to go out and physically inspect the works that have been done, or alternatively that the developer has been slow. I'll use the word slow in terms of meeting requirements. So there is a backlog. I believe there's something like 500 resource consent monitoring cases. They don't all have bonds attached to them, but a significant percentage of those may have bonds. So that would explain why we have a backlog. It is partly a resourcing issue. Council's not at a disadvantage necessarily because the money is held by council until
the question wasn't relating to the bonds, and I understand all of that. The question was really, some of these have been outstanding for a long time, and years, and the developer moved on, and it's just keeping track of those. I just want assurance that we're not losing that and dropping the ball, because if the time frame expires, we may not be able to actually get that work actually done.
Through the chair, the project that I'm leading here with the bonds and leading with the finance team, when we've finished it, we are going to complete a sense check that we've captured all the bonds that are aged, if you like. The process for bonds has changed, and so there'll be an audit.
Okay, good.
Well, in mine, I've planned an audit so that we actually go and look at the new process to make sure we're not going to end up in the situation that we've found ourselves.
Excellent. That's what we'll do. No other questions? Can I put it in?
Sorry, it's painful because it's one of your diagrams. What are blanks in terms of risks? So look at table 4.
Table 4?
Yeah. We've got a blank category there, which seems novel.
Through the chair, that blank category is exactly what it states, that the risks have gone in, but they haven't finished their work on those risks. So they're in the risk register, they have not been categorised. So I am trying to work through with all the groups to get that.
Right, okay, cool. Yeah, no, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put it to the vote then. All in favour? Yes, carried. That was item 6.3, so item 6.4. We've now got 6.3 again and again. It's crunchy. And that's on page 76 of one. So move and second for that, please.
Happy to move.
Councillor Smith, and I will second it. I see no other hands up, so I'm seconding it. And this is the receiving the report, the Three Waters operational risk. And we have Tanya again. Do you want to highlight some key, we'll take it as read, of course, but if you can highlight some key issues that you please.
Thank you. Through the chair, this report was requested at our last Assurance Risk Finance Committee meeting, and I've worked with three of the key players in the three water space to analyse our risks. So that's our now acting GM Corporate Services, People and Capability, and our General Manager Infrastructure and Asset Management, and he also called in another team member to work with us. What I've done in this report is we've identified three risks. There's a risk around the Three Waters transition, there is risk of Three Waters reform being rescinded, and there is risk if the Three Waters reform proceeds. So each of those risk statements aligns with those three themes. Along with just articulating those risks, I've looked at, because the question was how that affects our organisational risk, I've looked at our risks on a top organisational dashboard and have given you an idea of how I believe the trend for those additional risks that could be affected by these three risks, what would happen to those risks on our organisational dashboard. So I know there was a lot of discussion between the team of 4 or 5 in creating these risks and articulating them. So it's probably best just to open to questions if that's...
Yeah, that's good. Do I have questions? Clarification? Councillor Smith, that's all fine.
I'll lose my voice today, thanks. Thank you for this report, Tanya. It paints a really, another really good picture, and I think I just want to highlight to elected members, obviously we've all read the report, but the interesting state that we have the less risk faced to our organisation if the Three Waters reform progresses in some shape. Tanya, my question is around what next from here? This report paints us a little bit of a picture around the uncertainty with what's coming over the next few months and then the next couple of years. So it's really just understanding what level of, what we're going to do with this information at a governance level and how long we're going to check in on that over the coming 12 months or so, especially given what will be happening in November, December, Mr. Chair, with the passing of the bill, etc.
Through the chair, that's where, at governance level, I take my guidance from yourselves. If you want more regular reporting, then I will put that on my reporting for you. And if this report isn't hitting the information that you want or need, then again, please give us guidance, and I can ensure that the next report covers those aspects.
Member Bruce, and then...
Thank you. Tanya, I am very interested in the analysis and well done. I think it's good that we've looked at all the options. To check what I'm reading as an outside of risk B, we're effectively saying we need reform, aren't we? What we're really saying here in this risk is that actually if it doesn't go ahead, given the affordable issues we've talked about, given the challenges, we would struggle as a local authority to deliver what we know we need to deliver. It's actually quite a statement.
Yes.
About our own corporate liability.
It's not political.
And that's, I mean, I think what I want to reflect here, John, is that's a really important risk statement to us, which we need to think through. If we think, what is it? We've got a,
and I've got a question.
We've got a probable about that, whereas I think we're saying it's more likely that actually transition and reform will occur. But we are probably back to the drawing board if it doesn't occur. That's what it really says, because we've got challenges.
So I do have a question that relates to that similar argument, and I can see how you arrived at that. The question I've got is how many, I still thought there's a lot of unknowns, so there's probably a fair bit of discussion, which, and why I say that is when I did a talk recently actually on Three Waters, and some of the questions from engineers that came up were, well, one engineer, were to be cross-subsidised. And yet then I heard from another person who was actually on the board and said equity was definitely off the list, and cross subsidisation was not necessarily spelt out clearly. So I'm in a bit of dark, and so that's me personally, what is true and what isn't. So, and yet they will affect these schools significantly. I'm aware of Tauranga, for example, when the council stepped down there, they faced a significant rates increase because of the because of the commissioners coming in. And we all know there's this man here knows. He's go to, I don't know, mention any figures, but you can actually answer that perhaps. And I'll see Andy up there. And I'd know an answer. So my question is really, how much do we know to make a valid assessment of the risks in all of these things, given it seems to be still in a state of transition and a bit of a, but this is great. I'm not saying don't do this. I think we absolutely must do this, and I think I was requesting this. So I don't know who's going to answer, whether it's going to be Andy or...
I'll take the first one, Andy, because I can. I'll take the easy one out of the two. Sorry, Andy, you get the repercussions.
You get the bad face.
The first one is in the pre-election report. I think the figure that the chair is referring to is the $660 million mark to service the proposed district plan. Now, that is a number that is not in your, although there was an interesting comment made by a certain member that 6 years' time I'll have that done at $130, $140 million a year. But let's just say there are a number of projects in that will not address that growth issue. So $660 million of infrastructure upgrades to service the district plan. The priority between now and July 23 is to ensure we have known work programs that could be transferred to Entity A commencing July 24. Those work programs are critical to ensuring that we actually continue the growth trajectory shown in your proposed district plan. Whatever happens with that district plan, that is still the message that we are getting development occurring in, whether it's IAF funded in Kaio, Kaukaua and Kaikoa, or whether it's Kerikeri. There is a strong message that we have a housing and infrastructure deficit in Northland which needs to be addressed. What happens if it doesn't go? What happens if we don't do that? Well, that's a lot of the work that Andy is doing, because DIA initially said they will do the AMPs, but what they're really saying is they will review our AMPs because it's still, we do not have the Project Darwin information that would be necessary. So we're still carrying on condition assessments, capacity assessments. We are ramping up the amount of modelling that a chap in Andy's team or a consultant now is doing, Calvin Cap. But all of this is leading to linking Darren's team, Dean's team, Janice and Andy together. Andy, you get the tail end of that, sorry mate.
No, I think you've articulated it well. I think there is a lot of work that's needed to put the Far North into the best position possible in terms of a new entity, ensuring that we have a robust and thorough capital programme, and as Blair has articulated, that's the piece of work that is underway at the moment. We need to put our best foot forward for the Far North, and that's what we're doing. In terms of the uncertainty, then clearly there is an element of uncertainty, and that will continue until Bill 1 is published or passed into law in December, and then we have Bills 2 and 3, which will further provide some more detail to the bones on the bones. So the opportunity for this committee going forward is to get regular updates, and I would recommend that you do ask for those regular updates, because it is a changing environment, and the situation and the detail will only become certain, and you're quite right, Councillor Vucic, there are lots of stories and rumour that's circulating around New Zealand, but the certainty will be in the bill when it's published. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic. And Andy, what you're saying there is music to my ears. It sounds like an integrated planning organisation. So congrats, that's fantastic. I want to pick up on the point that you've made about recommending that the committee requests regular updates. And Mr. Chair, again, picking up on the point that I made initially, the only thing that we get to leave behind is our resolutions. So I'd like to propose that we add an amendment to this resolution and that the committee requests, and I would take the CE's advice, but I'm leaning toward quarterly updates, given the space that we're moving, quarterly updates to the committee, back to the committee on this similar. Joshua, if you can work with that.
If I can ask whether, because this is a report, and this transition, Three Waters is one of our, as mentioned before, one of our risks. Should we have a regular item in terms of the committee that's an updates coming through, and then be detailed all the time, or
through the committee chair, if that is what you request, it just comes down to the level of reporting, so that it's balancing. The work that I'm asking Andy to do is give me those plans, because I think, I'm not sure if it's clear, we're proposing certain work programs. So let's say I propose that from those work programs, there's $200 worth of work that is intended to start 1 July 2024. It's one of the work programs. Then the government changes and goes, actually, we're pausing this. We have got 200, because for this work to actually go in that year, there's a lot of pre-work with the contractors and the suppliers and everything else. To get that, there's a lot of sunk costs. This is work, the pre-work for that will actually be in 23. In 24, they may start putting stuff in the ground. So what I'm saying is we're working on a principle that we need to address some of this deficit in line with what the government has said around Three Waters, but your emerging risk is not so much that it will stop or not stop, is if you have to park that program. That is your big, because you will have a stranded liability way bigger than the rates.
Thank you for that.
John, can I just add one bit in? So these points well done. This is a really good report. It gives us the basis for future updates without having to go into great detail. And I'd actually, to be honest, this is something which I would even accept from a verbal perspective, because I think the ground is moving fast.
Fair enough.
The only thing I would add to what you've just said about what is the risk that we end up with a sunk cost liability, non-recoverable, which will only be recoverable off the ratepayer, unfortunately, is actually, and I guess we'll come back to this with the PX item, but also clearly the integrated planning that Rachel's lauded, and she should, that you're doing across the board, that clearly for us is important in terms of meeting 1 July 24. Yes, so I think that would be the other area that we could build in from here, is progress on that.
That's noted. So the committee secretary is nailed it.
Right, so what you're saying that you will identify, you will notify the audit risk committee of any change that
we will update. I understand the council wants an update, not a notification.
Absolutely, an update. And Mr. Smith, goodness me, Mr. Chair, it would be great to lock it into a resolution, just so the staff are really clear on our expectations of the work program going forward more than anything. So whatever I said plus whatever Bruce said, if we can cobble that into an amendment, I'm happy to move that.
Would a note be all right?
A note? Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Because that still gets tracked through.
Okay, I think that's all done. And no, I'm not part of Councillor Smith's file, just so we're clear.
No, my heart of mine.
Enough signs there.
So anyway, any other questions? I think this is a good report. Thanks, Tanya. Okay, so I'll put it for vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. We'll move on to item 6.5. Just see where the errors are. No, this is good. So do you want to move a second for that?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Member Bruce, second.
Happy to second.
Member Smith, Councillor Smith. Now, financial report. I'm going to ask Jenna, just to, again, we're taking this weekend, but if you can just highlight the key differences here that you want to highlight for the audience?
Through the chair, I'll take the report as read. This is the first report for the new financial year, so there's not a great deal of issues to comment on. I would comment on the rate emissions position. That is showing that it's an overspend against budget. I have asked the team to look at how we time that, because we know that a significant amount of those emissions go in the first period, so we should have timed that accordingly. So it's not an overspend, it's just that they go through in the first period. And the only other one is currently showing an overspend on staff-related costs. And that was a system error at the end of July that's now been corrected, and it was to do with the calculation for accrued leave. So it's not that everyone's been overpaid or anything, it was just how it was calculating the dollars attached to accrued leave, and that's now been corrected.
I have to admit, I'm quite impressed in trying to get the council's financial performance with income increasing 330%.
Most of that is the bringing forward of the PGF and DIA in the new year.
Yeah, I realise that.
Which is why it's coming up as development contributions in the table before people get excited about development contributions. It is actually contributions, which is coming across from DIA and PGF.
And on page 94, the capital expenditures is 3,677. So amazing what you can do with stats.
Well, percentages can be quite dangerous when you look at them.
All right. So, any questions? Yes. Councillor Smith?
Just a principal question more than anything, and it was because I was going cross-eyed reading the report with the percentages. My question, or perhaps the challenge, is just, is there a better way that we could be reporting some of these things as we go through the year, especially when we're reporting against budgets, so that we're not seeing 3,000%? Just from a low-level, non-financial acumen point of view, is there a better way that we could be reporting this, so that I don't need to go back and check the relevance of it and remind myself that it's because it's early in the year?
Through the chair, probably the easiest way is to remove the percentages altogether and just go to a red, amber, green warning system. We've got the colours in there anyway, so if that may be an easier option, just to go to red, amber, green, and then we can focus on those issues.
That would be helpful, thank you, because the percentages just blur everything.
They do.
Yeah, could be, but when you're dealing with small figures, that like the budget of 0.1. Yeah, but I think the key thing is verbal explanation, whether it be red, amber, green percentage.
Yes.
Member.
Thanks, John. I've been paid. I'd like to, you want to keep going and give us some questions. Janice, just to again, thank you that we've got a 31 July report. Just to reflect on our debt profile, so I'm looking at page 97, along with the ongoing need to manage Leah's comments around 20% increase in costs annually for construction. Interest rate risk is high. Increasing, but we have no debt maturing this year, apart from a very small, $10 million. Is that correct?
Correct. Through the chair, the $10 million was actually on the banking facility. That's now been repaid. Right. So no, we don't have any debt going this year.
In fact, our treasury position is relatively stable for this year from an interest rate perspective. Yes, but it will obviously affect your annual planning for the year at least. Okay, good.
Okay. And how are we progressing? Just looking around, there's no other questions, but how are we progressing, probably directed at Janice, in terms of our debt ceiling?
Through the chair, the debt ceiling will be restated following the end of the financial year, obviously with not as much capital having been completed as we'd hoped, then that's going to change those debt figures. Yeah. And it will probably push them down the line. So that's something that we need to reset once we've got through the annual plan annual report process.
40%. Yes, that's right.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we were expecting a starting position of over 100 million, and we haven't got it. So. Your balance sheet is on a spending spree, John. You're quite good.
I don't understand what's up there. 660 million.
Hopefully not in the first 2 years.
All right. No other questions? I'm putting it to the vote. All in favour? Aye. I'm getting hungry. Let me know, by the way, lunch is arrived.
It's arrived.
My 1 o'clock has been put back to 2:30, which is the scheduled timing of the meeting, so there's no pressure from me to choose the 1 o'clock.
Okay. We'll move on now. So item 6.6 on page 107. Notes, do I move a second, please?
Yep.
Okay, here Councillor Smith moved, and Councillor Smith second. And I guess, Chairman,
So this report changed from its inception to when it was delivered due to the contact that we had a week ago from the Office of the Auditor General advising that our audit was being reallocated to Deloitte's. We are yet to have any contact from Deloitte, so we don't know who our on-site audit lead or audit team is yet. We are assured by the OAG that any timelines that we'd agreed with the Audit New Zealand team will be honoured by the Deloitte team, likewise any pricing that we'd agreed. So all I can advise of as of now is that the world has changed in the last 2 weeks for us. We're continuing to do the work we would normally do for the annual report and providing all the information we would normally provide. We've just got no one to provide it to at the moment.
so he's telling us that the pricing and timeline will be guaranteed, so therefore that risk is.
So yes, the proposed fees that I've put in here that we agreed with Audit New Zealand last year will be honoured. The issue with Deloitte's coming in is that they might need to do more investigative work because they've not been on site with us before, so they have some background stuff that they need to put into place. We would not be charged for that. That would be at the cost of the OAG or themselves to do that work. There is also an agreement that the incoming and outgoing auditors will cooperate with each other, so the interim audit work that's already been done by Audit New Zealand will be passported to Deloitte.
Councillor Smith?
Janice, did I hear you right in saying that we now don't have anyone to give the work to, so it's not actually going to Deloitte? Did I hear that?
No, we don't know who to have.
Within the organisation. Sorry, I thought you were putting a giant red flag up there for a second.
No, we keep pushing to the OAG asking who to contact because we're really keen to start that dialogue to make sure that everything we're doing is what we need to do, and if there's anything more we need to be looking at, then we need to know now. So I am in touch with the sector lead on that to try and get who we're talking to, but
who the person
is, not the company.
Thank you.
Question. Do we have any, I know that we're locked in for the price for the audit for this year. We're not going to get this big surprise sudden increase next year. Is there any, are there any safeguards that we have that it's not just going to be like this general trend of the price going up that we're seeing here, but suddenly we've switched to a new provider and then they come in here and go, what the heck is going on in the far north? This is way more work than we thought it would be, and we're going to put it through the roof, or I don't know.
Through the chair, that's always a risk with a change. I would like to believe that everything that we're doing is in line with what Deloitte would expect. I'm not expecting any big red flags to come out of the change of auditor. Obviously, until we start the work on this year, we won't know. So we haven't got a plan beyond 2022. So this year and next year with Audit New Zealand. So
your biggest risk through the chair is the underlying information for the long-term plan. So you're aware your asset management plans for 3 waters are not up to scratch. You're aware that you have a growth deficit under your proposed district plan that isn't well integrated. By council as well, council that tend to get through the audits really well have an infrastructure strategy aligned with their financial strategy, aligned with their proposed district plan. You could actually tie all three documents together, and what one's saying, the other two are also reflecting. The council is not at that level of nirvana. So there's a lot of work to do around the asset management planning, and you've got a report on PX around Project Darwin, which is, say from my side, it's a project that realistically hasn't delivered what was expected of it, various reasons. So a new auditor coming in, what they're normally looking at is what are the things that they can pick up that show they've actually done a really good job. They don't necessarily go in from a point of view of we want to find something wrong, but they need to be able to demonstrate they've actually identified something reasonable. They're not just taking as gospel what everybody else said, because they are to verify. So there is a challenge with central government agencies saying asset management of councils needs to step up. And the Auditor General is also saying asset management and capital delivery are two items that they've been signalling or banging on about for the last 6 to 10 years. So if we're underspending on a capital delivery program, that raises a key risk as to what we're doing, because now with the inflation that's with. These are the sort of things that I think we will not see a downward trajectory in the fee. It will go the other way. They will say, we would like more evidence around underpin this. What we're doing is on the new house.
But to balance it up, the change of auditor doesn't change that. That's an issue that we haven't been dealing with properly. And bringing it to the fore and highlighting it in the longer term is actually a good thing. From as I see from council. But as you say, it does increase the potential costs that we're going to have for the detail.
Just the mechanics of this, it will go up when Deloitte's are asked to issue a new 3-year proposal, primarily because they are labour based. And it's fair to say that labour rates are going up. So that in some way will be passed on to us. The guy that took to us, Murray Powers, the Director of Appointments, he must moderate all fees before they are issued to any of the local authorities in the country. So there is a moderate means of there being a check at what Deloitte will ask us in the future, which, as I'm saying, will be increased, is reasonable. The big issue, and I take the point, Leah, is they get here and say, well, now in 2022, I think there are more bigger risks with us, and you're hinting at one of those risks than they've been led to believe. In which case, like any contractor, they're going to price that into their contract. The reality of it is, if they price that in for good valid reasons, we should say yes, because we want that. Exactly. We want the transparency and spotlight on that through our audit. That will provide us with value. But the mechanics is, yes, it will go up. Yes, there's a moderation before the fee comes our way.
All right. I don't know, Janice, if you can comment on why the change.
Through the chair, it's a resourcing issue for Audit New Zealand. We've been struggling to get our audit scheduled through Audit New Zealand, purely because they can't get the staff into the country to do the work. So they've been shuffling the deck chairs around to try and audit accordingly. We would be complete and cleared by the 8th of October to the audit not even starting until the 25th of October. And what the Office of the Auditor General was seeing was pressure on that December date that is the last of the extensions that was granted, and the possibility that audits would be started by that date. So they have looked at other entities that they can give the audit work to, and who are more able to pick up or drop certain work in order to make room for those to happen. So it's a resourcing issue there.
And many councils are in that position, and it's to do with access to international borders and so on. All right, no other questions? To the vote, all in favour? Aye. Item 6.7 on page 111. Move in a seconder. Dale, I'll second it. And this is the actions sheet. And there's,
Just confused as to why there's no action sheet when we had some notes tracked through from, I thought, last time. Just again, my point about leaving footprints in resolutions.
Chairman, the notes from the last meeting have actually been actioned. One of them was the Three Waters.
Okay.
Report that we put on this agenda. I'm not aware of any others that we're tracking through.
Just on that though, just in terms of the, as we go into the new triennium, some of these things are very important. Is there a process in place to bring them out and then just say these are coming through from the previous council? Would be nice. So when
Open action sheets.
Yeah, so that whoever they are, the new council can actually see it. And that'll be across the board, obviously. All right. I'm going to put this to the vote then. All in favour? Against? Carried. That brings us to the end. And what we'll do is not here. Yep. Right, so I'll move that we go for reasons into public excluded. Second that? Second, so all in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. Next, Matty. Now, want to thank everybody here. It's been a really good team, and it's been quite an exciting journey we've been on when we have made some improvements. And hopefully we can continue to grow and progress. And so now I'm going to say thank you all again and just ask, and remember Penny's just stepped out, just thank her for joining and as well. And I'm going to ask now Councillor Smith to close and Kia.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, John.
Kia ora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei huaraki mā tātou I te rai nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I tātou katoa. Hui e, tai.
Thank you, everybody.